Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to today's Global Wind Workforce Outlook webinar with a particular focus on the Americas region. And of course, we're stretching from the Arctic to the Antarctic in this. So we're very pleased to welcome some guests which have a great geographical spread from across the different markets. We'll begin with an introduction to just those. We have Laura Phelan, who's Senior Vice President of Strategy at American Clean Power. We have Ramon Fiestas, who, amongst other things, is Chair to the Latin American Committee of GWEC. We have Jeremy Faria, who is a GWO training provider in Brazil, working for Mass Training with a specialization in people and performance. And for the home team, we have Feng Zhao from GWEC, who is one of the co-authors of the report. And from GWO, we also have my good friend and colleague, Haiqing Wang, who is the data analyst here. So when we now have your speaker slides up, so that's always a good thing for people to focus in on who we've got. And so to begin, let's go to Haiqing to start the conversation about what we found out about this year's forecast.
Yes, thank you, Ian, for the introduction. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to share the findings from the latest GWO report. So before we dive into the numbers, I want to take a moment to reflect on the purpose of this report. So we are heading toward a net zero emissions future. In this journey, wind energy is sit at the corner of global energy transformation. And looking back in 2023, the wind energy sector has set a remarkable new record of 117 gigawatts of new capacity added. And we all know this is just a beginning. We have more innovation coming, more commitment coming, and the forecast wind installation per year is expected to grow year over year. So according to GWEC's forecast, in the 5 years from 2024 to 2028, in total, there will be 791 gigawatts of new capacity being added. And this is displayed in the chart, represented by the column. It reflects the new capacity that's already in wind developers' project pipeline. Next to the column bar, we have the line. This line represents the level of installation we need to follow to stay on track to the net zero emission future. It's clear that we're heading toward the right direction, but the gap between the line and the column is telling us there is still more work to do. And for the wind energy sector means we need full-scale effort to secure the projected wind installation in the next 5 years. And this growth in wind installation brings about important questions regarding the workforce. So the question is, do we have the skilled workforce ready to meet the demand? And in given region, how well are wind developers prepared? What will be the challenge that we must tackle to ensure the industry's success? And to quantify the demand of wind technicians is an important part for answering these questions. So based on wind installation forecast, we estimate that by 2028, there will be over 532,000 wind technicians required to do the work in construction, installation, operation, and maintenance. And notably, we estimate that 40% of this total workforce will need to be newly recruited in 5 years When we say newly recruited, we mean we need to bring new technicians from elsewhere, and wind energy for them will be a new field. In this year's report, we have selected 10 markets to watch. These countries, they are selected because they're either leaders for wind energy development or because they're emerging markets with ambitious targets. And back then we just mentioned the total number of wind technicians needed. And now it will be helpful to understand the trends when we look at the distribution, the structure of the workforce. So now we're looking at the chart displaying the demand between onshore and offshore sector. As what we can see here, the total workforce demand is growing, and in the future, in the recent future, the primary demand will still remain for onshore projects. And at the same time, we're seeing offshore workforce demand is growing. On the right-hand side, this is the breakdown of workforce demand by sector and segment. For offshore sector, we are seeing both task-related workforce is expected to grow. But for onshore, we are seeing a very interesting trend here. So first, the O&M-related workforce, its growth has flattened. And also the CNI workforce will grow and remain stable and drop slightly when approached to the end of study period. And this is largely due to a significant rise in average turbine size. So GWEC forecast a significant rise in turbine size means in future, fewer turbines will be required to generate the same amount of energy. And there is no evidence saying to handle these bigger turbines, that human force carry the weight and complexity. So the reality is we rely on advanced machines and tools. So to summary, is the increase in average turbine size is mitigating the growth in wind technician demand. One thing we're sure about is a larger turbine brings a more complicated environment to work in. Technicians will be required with a higher level of expertise and skills to handle the advanced machines and tools. And to supply the industry with skilled, well-trained workforce has been GWO's continuous effort. Looking backwards, we monitor the number of technicians that hold valid GWO Basic Safety Training Certificate. This number has been growing, and we foresee this trend to continue. As we approach to the end of this year, globally, around 40% of active technicians, they have a valid GWO Basic Safety Certificate. And this figure will rise up to 60% for regions excluding mainland China. For many years, we are forecasting on the number of technician demand, but how about supply? There is no central repository reporting this statistics. But now we found with this sector rich, GWO has a strong position in reporting the number of technicians available. So looking backwards, in 2019 and 2020, there was a surge in wind technician demand. And we assume the year after 2021, there was sufficient amount of technicians available globally to meet the demand, meet the workload in CNI and O&M sectors. And from 2021, we assume an organic growth of available technicians. From there, we compare the number of available technicians and also the technician demand. We estimate a 6 to 8% of vacancies will remain unfilled. A 6 to 8% of vacancy doesn't seem to be a critical crisis, but for employers, they are facing a growing group of underskilled, underexperienced technicians. So essentially, the real problem might not be captured by the vacancy share. It's taking the form of brain drain. And this raises question for wind sector. If we cannot have a well-established workforce talent pipeline, and this will pose challenge. We want a full-scale effort to secure at least the projected wind capacity installation. In today's webinar, we focus on the Americas region. In this year's report, we have selected the United States and Brazil as markets to watch. Look at the Americas region as a whole. In total, 111 gigawatts of new capacity will be added in 5 years. And this will bring the cumulative wind capacity to exceed 300 gigawatts. Now look at the sub-region. So Central America, GWEC forecast its wind installation to grow intermittently around less than 1 gigawatts per year. For South America, its annual installation will remain steady, and North America will be the sub-region drive the wind development in the region. And look at the right-hand side. This is the new capacity breakdown by onshore and offshore. We're saying both sectors are growing. At country level, we're seeing United States and Brazil leading the regional wind development. The two countries together accounts for over 80% of new capacity in 5 years. And this, the wind installation, correspondingly, the workforce demand will also grow. We forecast that over 106,000 wind technicians will be needed in the region. And this is 19% of growth compared to last year. And this is primarily driven by the onshore wind addition. We'll look at the chart on the left side. So the blue one and the green one is onshore workforce. And the light blue and the orange one, they reflects the technician demand for offshore wind projects. When speak of safety training, the industry always target as 100% coverage. And for GWO, it means we also target 100% coverage of our basic safety training standard. By the end, by 2024 year to date, we found over 22,000 of North America technicians hold a valid BST record. And for Latin America, this number is 14,000. Compare the number of technicians with valid BST certificate with the total demand of technicians in that region. We can see the progress. The progress in Latin America is very good, and actually also very good in North America. And North America is with a bigger wind technician demand. So still a lot of opportunity for certification. Then we look at the breakdown of workforce by onshore and offshore. we are seeing a very steady onshore O&M task-related workforce. America region has a relatively mature onshore wind market, and back in 2023, the number of O&M-related technicians is even higher than the construction installation needed technicians. And this situation has been changed from this year. The Americas region is entering a peak period of onshore wind installation activity. And for offshore segment, offshore market is emerging and it's rising. And this converts to around 3,000 technicians needed for 2024, and this will rise up to over 5,000 by 2028. In United States, in total, 65 new onshore capacity will be added, and 10 gigawatts of new offshore capacity will be added. This will bring the cumulative wind capacity to exceed 200 gigawatts. So we can see the line here represents the annual wind installation by sector. So both onshore and offshore wind installation, annual wind installation is growing year over year. And the this translates to over 75,000 technicians needed for onshore wind projects and over 5,000 technicians for offshore projects. In Brazil, in our study period, all new capacity will still remain for onshore projects. And in total, 16 gigawatts new onshore capacity will be added, and this take the cumulative capacity to 47 gigawatts. We can see in 2023, Brazil set a record in wind installation, but after that, GWEC forecast the wind installation to slow down a bit, and this is because Brazil is experiencing pressure from macroeconomy. The wind installation and also operation and maintenance need translates to 11 to 12,000 of technicians per year. Okay, so with all this being said, I will hand it back to Ian. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to take questions. So write down if you have questions.
Okay, thank you, Haiqing. We're doing actually a quick switch over to our next speaker, who is from GWEC. We'll be speaking to Feng Zhao, who's going to give us a little more on the policy frameworks that we've discovered as part of the important framework for the forecast. After which we'll be joining our panelists for a discussion where, as Haiqing suggested, there's an opportunity for answering some questions from the audience, and of course finding out the perspectives from our speakers. So over to Feng.
All right, thank you, Ian. So we have two country case study here, I believe. Let's move to the next slide. I guess that's the US. Without any doubt, US is largest onshore wind market so far, primarily for onshore. Globally speaking, US is the second largest market at this moment. The numbers, I just want to make some clarification. The data we put together for this report, that's before the election. So renewable, even though we see the record year installation for both wind, solar PV, etc., but still it's a policy-driven market. Looking at the wind, that's specifically the case, US particularly. So before the election, I think we all understood the passage of Inflation Reduction Act has driven the huge opportunity for this market, and not just the the growth of project pipeline for both onshore and offshore, and also has generated a lot of investment for facility, including nacelle, onshore, offshore, and also for component. For offshore wind, we have BOP as well. That's the foundation cables across the entire countries. Unfortunately, after the election, we can see Republican going to take over the office from the 20th of January. So many discussions been going on, and including Trump made a statement, and from the day one, he's going to stop the offshore wind growth development in the U.S. So GWEC market intelligence team, my team right now, we're working on the Q3 outlook and looking at the numbers. We're updating at this moment. I just want to quickly share some the latest data. If we're looking at onshore, so we have bring down the onshore wind outlook for the next 5 years between 2024 and 2028, from 65 gigawatt to less than 50 gigawatt. That's 49 gigawatt, which means that we have bring down our projection for this projection period by 25%. If we're looking at the offshore, the situation is even worse. So before the election, we believe that around 10 gigawatt offshore wind can be built in the next 5 years, including 2024. But looking at the situation today, we believe only 5 projects, which has to some extent, half of that is under construction. Another 2 are ready to be built. So in total, that's only 6 gigawatt, which means we have downgrade our 5 years outlook for U.S. offshore by 41%. That's a lot. Even though folks may argue, looking at the state which got the benefit from IRA, that's primarily for this Republican dominant state, but still, due to the stretch of the parties, it will generate a lot of uncertainty to the U.S. market. So again, we have to follow the policy status very closely. Luckily, we have Laura on this call. I believe she can elaborate a bit more about what could be the impact for the growth in the U.S. market and potentially the impact for the workforce trailing. But in general, even though we downgrade our projection, looking at the growth of the market for both onshore and offshore, still we're going to see for onshore wind, we're still going to see the increase compared with 2023, 2024. Like 2023, only have 6.4 gigawatt. This year, most likely around 7. But next year, looking at project pipeline, which has been in terms of order intake, I think both GE, Vestas, they have a strong pipeline there. Of course, the projection probably for after 2025 will drop, but relatively something right now, looking at annual installation between 2026 and 2028, we just downgrade from something around 15 gigawatt into 10 gigawatt. So it's still a strong baseline there. So offshore wind, a huge question mark, but we're going to follow that closely. Next slide, please. So let's move from North America down to the South America. Brazil, absolutely, it's a bright spot in terms of growth. Brazil, it's number 4 market in terms of new installation. In 2023, nearly 5 gigawatt, I think 4.8 gigawatt has been installed. That's a record year for this market. Looking at the growth, in general, if we're looking at how many gigawatt has been built in the past few years, let's see, looking at the past 3 years, Brazil has the installation 2021 3.8, 2022 4, last year 4.8. So it's on this growth tragedy at this moment. However, we have identified, what's going on in this market, and due to we have the growth in the past 3 years primarily driven by the corporate PPA. You could call it a free market. We have a lot of wind and solar PV installed. Somehow it has bring down the electricity demand growth, the price. At the same time, the country has some problem with the infrastructure, primarily in terms of grid installation, grid connection. So therefore, at the beginning of this year, when I worked with Ramon, my colleague on the school, looking at the outlook for the next 5 years, including 2024, we have already downgraded our annual installation from 4.8 to, I think, to something around 4. But looking at the latest statistics that's shared by Ramon, we most likely end up this year with 3.8 gigawatts. But moving forward, how many gigawatts are going to be built? It depends on a couple of factors. But the good thing is that the government is climate-friendly administration, and next year, after this year, Brazil hosts the G20, but next year will be a big year in terms of COP, the climate change conference. So we really hope some positive policies will be in place, and we're going to see the continuing growth of the onshore wind installation. Looking at offshore, luckily, I think my colleague, our policy director, Roberta, based in Brazil, just to share some information. Most likely, the offshore wind bill will be passed. And maybe, Ramon, you can confirm later. But that's a good sign. Even though progress has been made, but we don't believe that big project will be built. Commercial offshore wind will be built by the end of this decade, potentially from the beginning of the next decade. But there's some good news is that the 2 Chinese turbine OEM, GWO and Mingyang, they are going to install probably 1 unit of prototype test for this test project. The trial project, GWO are planning to build a project with 1 turbine 8.2 megawatt, Mingyang 6.25 megawatt. So again, look at the government, the plan. I think the oil and gas company in this market are going to working together with government. They're talking about build a child project, 22 megawatt. So let's see, it is possible before 2030 we're going to see probably the first turbine installed in the water. So in general, we still have a big confidence about Brazil will continue the journey and drive the growth in this region. So that's some snapshot for the 2 key markets in this region. Now let's quickly move down to the next slide. I think that's the policy recommendation for the how to build workforce across the regions or on the country level to support the renewable installation. Looking at the global ceiling, I think start from 2020 from COP29, more than nearly 200 countries has signed a plea, double down, triple up, tripling renewable by 2030. But looking at where we are across global, specifically for this region, I think Xiaoqing's slides already indicate we need a lot of workforce to support the growth. It is true, but how to make sure that we have the enough workforce to support the growth in key markets, including the US, Brazil, and emerging markets, including a list of emerging markets in Latin America. I think the message is clear from this slide. Government needs to set up the workforce target to support the growth. But again, like the onshore offshore wind project, target is just a target. To get the target into the feasible policy to support the workforce training, we need the government to introduce to provide actually make the real investment and provide funding to support the training, and also make sure that they have the strategic policy in place to promote the industry, and also in order to get local jobs created, potentially primarily for offshore wind, we need to considering the non-price criteria, make sure that we have local job creation included in this auction program. We can see, looking at the offshore wind program under this IRI in the US, I think that's a good example. Creating the local jobs can actually get for the developer, they can get the extra bonus. Similar incentive should be considered in other offshore markets, for example, in Brazil, in this region. The second key recommendation for this is in terms of the training. So we don't have enough workforce on a global level. I think that could be the same case in this region. We need to introduce educational courses. We need to have the training program from university, and this cross-industry collaboration. And also another key area where we need to think about is talk about the reskilling program. That has been done in other emerging markets, for example, in offshore wind market, in Philippines, Vietnam, Australia, and we believe that similar reskilling program should be promoted in market, not just in the US, and also Brazil. We have oil and gas industry there as well. So similar training program should be considered for new market offshore-wise, for example, Colombia as well. Another recommendation is regarding the diversity. At this moment, I think the majority of the workforce in the renewable or in the wind industry, that's male. So again, to support the tripling target by 2030, we need more female to join the journey to support the growth and help to achieve 1.5 energy pathway. Last but not least, that's we need to set up the standard. You heard a lot of the accident, not just in some of the new market that's happened already in China, Chinese offshore 2 years ago during the international rush, not long ago even in Australia, people, the workforce got killed due to the relatively lower safety standard. So therefore, to set up the right standard to protect the safety of the workforce, we need to think about how to embrace advantage of global standard workforce initiative. That could be the GWO training course. So in general, I think the industry need to working together to create a quite good ecosystem, make sure that we got enough, not just infrastructure, we have the soft power as well, and also workforce. I'm going to stop here now, so leave the time to the panel discussion. Thank you, and back to Ian.
Okay. Thank you very much, Feng. That's very informative. As I said earlier, we are lucky to be joined with 3 speakers from across the industry. Laura from ACP, Jeremy from Maersk Training Brazil, and of course Ramon from GWEC, who has a special responsibility for South America. I think the interesting point, of course, is the news from the US perspective and the changes that Feng was outlining in terms of the downgrading of the forecast for North America, or basically for the USA, of course. Although this is early days, Laura, did you have a particular opinion, or can you speak to those changes as they've appeared from Washington?
Sure, and I would encourage all the folks on the phone to look at our Q3 market report, which has some of this included on ACP's website. But we are anticipating, similarly to what you have shared here, that there shouldn't be that much difference in what's happening with onshore wind, but it's the offshore wind where we're anticipating quite a significant slowdown, unfortunately. And for those on the phone who don't know, the US permitting process, our offshore permits for the most part are federally controlled. And so therefore a shift in administration actually changes the outlook there. And many of you have likely heard President-elect Trump say many negative things about offshore wind. And so we are anticipating some action there, and that's within his locus of control. Whereas the permitting across the country for onshore wind is actually locally controlled. And therefore, there's less formal authority that the executive branch in the United States would have over those permits.
Of course. Do you think there's actually a possibility of a bounce, therefore, in the onshore wind?
Well, some of the delays, and this is outlined in your report, that were associated with slower timelines for projects to come online were associated with supply chain disruptions, which were quite significant for us. In the past year, the onshoring of our manufacturing for the component parts for onshore wind have increased quite significantly, actually faster than almost any other industry in the United States. I think there's if I remember the figure, it's a 26% increase in the onshoring of the component parts associated with building the pieces of a turbine in a wind farm, and that's quite significant. So some of those challenges and the cost controls associated with them have been ironed out over the past year, and so we are anticipating that onshore wind will have an uptick from the slowdown that we saw in 2024.
Yeah, exactly. And I was mentioning earlier on, there was a possibility of sort of knowledge transfer across the region in terms of previous experience. Jeremy, in Brazil, there was perhaps some lessons from recent past in terms of the previous administration in Brazil. Is there anything that you think might be useful to pass on in terms of the experience in the industry during an administration that was less positive towards
Yeah,
offshore?
I actually made a couple of notes here while Feng was presenting. Legislation, and this is going to sound odd on a renewable energies webinar, but legislation for oil and gas is now being passed for the Northeast offshore areas of Brazil. And right now, one of the big hurdles is exactly federal legislation, just like in the US for anything offshore. So what we're actually anticipating now, as odd as this may sound, is that if the oil and gas legislation passes, there is hardly anything to stop wind, because there's a big difference in terms of potential damage to the environment. And because oil and gas traditionally has more money involved, they tend to get their way. So in a weird twist of things, we are actually rooting a little bit for oil and gas to get their permits, because then that opens up the door for wind. As it stands, nothing is happening. So if oil and gas gets their way, then wind just follows through right away, and like the US, the big barrier is the federal permitting process and the federal Environmental Protection Agency. We're just hoping that the doors will open up, and then there's this, more like a floodgate for wind opportunities. That said, however, with the demand coming up of some just over 16 going on 17 possible gigawatts of onshore, we're not going to have enough technicians. So we are now in the process of putting together an entry-level guide for the Brazil Wind Association, in collaboration with the GWO, and that there should help newcomers and the old heads in the industry to set direction for training and the preparation of new industry workers, industry technicians, both for construction, installation, operation, and maintenance. We are at the moment suffering a bit of an exodus of technicians. Technicians are going to other countries in South America, and right now the #1 place for Brazilian technicians is the US. So there is that dent in our present workforce also, where we are losing technicians because of the higher demands in other regions in the Americas. So that about summarizes my notes that I made, but it does show a little bit of the dynamics which is happening on the ground level of the wind industry in Brazil.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of very common themes which have been coming out from the different webinars around the world. Feng, your latest figures for Brazil and the US show this sort of downturn. Are there benefits that they can play off against each other in terms of their different cycles, do you think, and cycles of manufacturing in terms of onshoring that's obviously been happening and Laura mentioned in terms of the supply chain? We haven't got Feng.
Oh yeah, that's a question for me, right? I would recommend, we invite my colleague Ramon step in for this question, and we're being in the conversation to upgrade, update our data. Most likely, we're going to launch our Q3 outlook. So Ramon.
Thank you, Feng. Thank you, Ian. Yes, definitely. In the Latin America region, wind power is in each market is policy driven. So you see ups and downs every year in every region, in every country of the region. I mean, not exactly every year, but in every country, fast every year, you can see political changes. So this means that when you look into the overall figure of the region, there is always upsides and downs because these political changes and, of course, changes of the political support for renewable energies. In the case of Brazil, is already 60% of the Latin America region in total wind energy installed capacity. So with close to 30 gigawatts, Brazil is the largest market by far, and was the largest market since wind power has been installed in Latin America. So there is a very, I would say, well-fitted supply chain for the market, and not only for the market, because now I totally support Jeremy's comment in terms of the migration of a number of technicians from the Brazilian market into other markets, exactly because this underperformance, let's call it like that, of the Brazilian wind energy market that we are foreseeing for the next couple of or 3 years in a row, which has to do exactly with a lack of policy-driven measures in order to keep the stability of the supply chain in Brazil. So it's necessary to understand that the market in Brazil started at the beginning with policy measures, absolutely focused on the competitiveness of wind in terms of providing specific auctions, schemes, and designs for wind power at the beginning, and later on for renewable energies, in the framework of the electricity system of Brazil, which is used to allocate capacity power through competitive measures or mechanisms. Yeah. This is something that was regular in Brazil for a number of years, but in the year 16 or 17, Brazil faced a very large economic crisis, and this impacted strongly to the electricity demand. So from the demand side, there was, or from the policy side, it was at that time not necessary to enact new and further competitive tenders to allocate capacity, because capacity was not necessary at that time. So this was an example of how at that time the market was punished, and so to some extent because of the lack of political decisions in order to go for more wind power. What we saw after this economic crisis is a recovery of the market, but not based on policy-driven mechanism, but based on the strong competitiveness of wind in terms of being the most cheapest electricity in the electricity matrix, and very well deserved by large consumers. So this opens a space for private purchase in the framework of the private purchase scheme, regulated scheme of Brazil. So, and this has been working very, very good in the last 3-4 years, in which you can see this upgrade of the Brazilian installed wind power installed capacity that has come to the end in 2023, because there is a strong competition on one hand by solar PV distributed generation, which means that some close to 20% of the electricity demand, 20%, 20, of the electricity demand in Brazil is now being supplied by solar PV deck panels. So this means a huge piece of the electricity demand on this side, and on the other side, demand is not growing as fast as necessary in order to keep momentum for this long-term PPAs agreements. So both, let's say, both situations or both circumstances are affecting strongly the performance of the market in Brazil, which needs now, again, policy-driven measures to keep the supply chain where it is.
What about the people involved in these markets? I mean, when the markets fluctuate, there's an influx or an exit of workers, and this is really the focus of this particular webinar. How can we cover over those fluctuations in the up and downs of these markets in terms of giving meaningful jobs to workers which have been trained to do this job, and stop them in Brazil going off to oil and gas, or in the US, you know, stop them going into alternative fuel sources? Laura, are you still with us? If you had any thoughts about how we can sort of give certainty of career paths to this sort of people that are facing some uncertainty in their own industry?
Well, with regard to wind and wind turbine technicians, which is really the big gap we're focused on here at ACP and at the Clean Power Institute, which is our sister nonprofit organization focused on workforce development. The folks that are a much smaller subcomponent of the demand that is outlined in your report, we are at such a shortage right now of individuals who are located in the relevant geographies to actually service these turbines, that the fluctuation isn't the gravest concern to us, to be honest. It's actually filling the gaps. We're anticipating even greater numbers than are outlined in your report in terms of demand for the operations and maintenance wind turbine technicians. And there just isn't a geographical match in a country the size of the United States, where wind projects are largely in rural areas away from where the human beings live who would man these projects. And so what we are doing is actually trying to align where the training is happening with where we're projecting the new projects to go well in advance. and actually making a match between supply and demand with more intentionality and focus than I think has been the situation in the past. And in the past, it didn't need to be as focused and strategic because the supply and demand weren't so far off. That's just our margin for error is so much smaller now. And what we've been doing in partnership with GWO, and I think many people know this, is actually aligning the very baseline training required to enter into the wind profession with common guidelines that have now been integrated across GWO's training facilities and the sites that they are accrediting as being representative of their standard of work. We're also enabling that permutation or the adoption of those guidelines into all the company training programs so that there's one universal standard. On top of that, what we lack in the US is actually a certification that even after you take the courses that have been certified by GWO, you can perform them well at site at the level anticipated. So we are rolling out and piloting actually a certification starting in January across a number of companies for a full rollout across the United States in 2026. And that's one way we're trying to standardize what it means to just be a Tech 1 in our country, saying you need to be able to do these basic things, and then building out an assessment program and ensuring we're maintaining a high quality bar. The next step beyond that is to do it for the Tech 2, Tech 3, and beyond, so that there is a very clear pathway that allows workers to know what to expect and can be retained, and actually that the mobility between companies and workers it's less of a guessing game, just the standardization that happens when an industry matures.
Yeah, so that will scale up, in effect, the pathways that we started off working with you on in terms of the ACP. We call it the entry-level framework. I know that the ACP have a slightly different title to it, but this is also happening in Brazil, of course, which Jeremy alluded to as well at the same time, in trying to develop a way that we can give unity to expectations as much as any of the training that we can do as well. Feng, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I just want to follow up on what Nara mentioned here. It is true, even though we're going to see the U.S. market impact by the new administration, but in general, we need to be aware. U.S., as I mentioned earlier, it's the second largest single market. Even though offshore wind is relatively small, less than 200 megawatt in operation, but onshore wind alone, we have like 150 gigawatt installed already by the end of 2023. We say, okay, we already downgrade 25% of the onshore wind outlook for the US for the next 5 years, including 2024. But still, if we're looking at how many gigawatt will be built between 2024 and 2028, every year we're going to see more than 10 gigawatts be built. This is still, compared with the relatively lower information in 2023, that's below 7 gigawatt. So we actually is saying the uplift of the information for new information. So because this study we put together, we are looking at the workforce demand for installation. Another part that's for O&M. So in general, the pool, the number of fleet are going to increase year after year. So in general, of course, we see a negative impact due to Trump administration. But looking at the total installation across the all the fleet across the whole countries, I believe we need more workforce. Thank you.
Absolutely. An area that we haven't really talked about is the role of the training provider, and also, of course, the educational institutions that take the relatively unskilled worker into the industry. Jeremy, is there any sort of one thing that might make it easier for people like yourselves who are bringing on new entrants into the industry to make it more appealing, or show a way forwards?
I believe that the guidelines that's in the works right now will bring a lot more of the technicians who are working without standardized training into the standardized training world. Like Laura was saying, you know, there needs to be a bar set, and that bar, I believe, will start with the guidelines that's in the works, and bringing more people the awareness that it's all good and well to do training, but if that training is not up to standard, then yeah, you're not quite there. So for us as training providers, we are very anxiously looking forward to seeing the guidelines set up and functional, so that companies now have this beacon of light to aim towards, and consequently more technicians are trained at a bar which is acceptable and beyond, and not below what it should be. Unfortunately, in lots of locations around the world, training is done, but not at the right standard, not at the right level. So while they may hold a certificate, there is no real guarantee that I can do what the certificate says. So with the guidelines, we're hoping that more companies see the necessity for standardized training, and that consequently spills over into the world of training providers, you know, delivering the level of training which the industry not only wants but should demand. And I believe that's the path that's going to be taken in Brazil.
Right. We're coming up to the hour. So maybe it's an opportunity to just have some last comments. And unfortunately, the time is against us. Haiqing, anything you wanted to add? You had an opportunity to think about some of the things you've heard about the situation in the US. Any prospects for the forecast being updated in the next few years, in terms of anything you've heard?
Yes, we've heard this year for quarter three, we already downgrade the forecast, and correspondingly, the number of technician demand based on this, the foundation will also be a slightly drop. So in the future, we are more interested in having more granularity. So in this year, on global level, we have reported the comparison between wind technician demand and availability. And I believe a more developed guidelines on job roles or training plan will inform this to add more granularity when we forecast the availability. And this will be an average area I want to further study.
And of course, we've already mentioned that net zero is, of course, another factor in this whole discussion.
Yeah.
So although with some markets are downgrading, we're still, a shortage is still evident, probably globally.
Ian, sorry, maybe 1 minute before we close out. I saw there is a question from a gentleman in the channel regarding if GWO are going to do some kind of outreach program. I just mentioned, you know, actually GWEC, we're working closely with the arena, together with more than 20 countries so far through the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. For example, we launched this Global Offshore Wind Workforce Report together with GWO 2 weeks ago in GWEC APEC Summit in South Korea. I think we actually share these findings on the main stage. We also share, you know, the concern regarding, you know, what needs to be done in order to build up the workforce to support the ambitious offshore wind target in APAC region. We are going to do similar, you know, close to roundtables. I believe next year, that's a big, you know, momentum. I mentioned earlier, next year COP30, that's what take place in Brazil. I believe that GWEC, through the global GOA, we call Global Offshore Wind Alliance, we're going to bring the minister level of delegation into one room, and we are going to have some workshops. Certainly, we are going to share, you know, the concern in terms of gaps of workforce with those primarily those emerging markets who had a big trend for new technology like offshore. But we will get there. So we do leverage, you know, social media, open stage on our conference, and also close to roundtable to promote the job creation. Okay.
Yeah, and in response to that question, as you pointed out, Feng, the simple answer is that GWO Global organization as it is doesn't take responsibility for outreach into individual countries, but of course we work very closely with organizations like ACP, and Laura can certainly say more about how your activities can be accessed to the local market in the USA, and of course in Brazil, Abiolica, we're also working very closely with, as Jeremy has intimated, in Brazil, and that's our general way of operating. So over to Laura to tell us a little bit about how anybody needing information in the US can reach out.
That's perfect. And if whoever's managing the chat, I just put a note, but it looks like it only goes to hosts and panelists from my side. But if you can broadcast it.
We will do that.
About 6 weeks ago, launched a fairly massive national recruitment campaign for wind technicians. And there's the website if anyone wants to take a look. We pooled resources across 11 different companies that are really looking for wind technicians, and hired a marketing firm, are buying very sophisticated digital ads in the core markets that are most difficult to find talent, and where we're anticipating the larger projects to be developing. And we're working also with community colleges in those areas to build up their talent pipeline, and so that trained technicians are ready to work in these locations. So we're taking this quite seriously, putting fairly significant dollars behind such a recruitment campaign, and actively working with our industry partners to ensure we are opening new talent pipelines. It's just not a well-known career yet in the United States.
No, that's great news, and we're very happy to pass on any information from the panelists of suggestions about people who are looking for careers advice or how to enter the market. Jeremy, you're dealing with participants every day who are looking for careers. Any sort of suggestions of what you might do in Brazil, apart from obviously contact one of our GWO training providers in the country?
I don't think we have anything as wide scale as Laura's plan, but it is an idea that I'd happily pinch and try to implement over here. But in the meanwhile, reaching out to your nearest global wind organization, GWO Training Center, would be a good start. Looking at the GWO website itself to look at the entry-level framework so that people can choose one of the pillars to follow a career, whether it's in construction or all the way down to maintenance. That would also be a very good source of information. The easiest by far is just reaching out to a GWO provider who can help explain the different paths, the different career availabilities within the industry.
Thank you for that plug, Jeremy. I can only completely agree. Lastly, we have Ramon for some summary comments about maybe one thing that someone looking to move into wind can do to help themselves.
Yeah. My recommendation is always targeting to policymakers and politicians in order to keep stable markets, in order to keep supply chains alive, in order to keep jobs alive, in order to keep intellectuality and performance alive. So always, this is absolutely necessary, because otherwise we are going to see this upsides and downs, and probably this is the worst for the markets in terms of and the right knowledge at the right moments. If we are foreseeing an uptake of offshore wind for the next decade in Latin America, as we are foreseeing first and afterwards Colombia and some other markets that are coming behind, we need to see stability for the investments. Otherwise, it is going to be extreme to reach to those stations that we need on these new areas in the region. So again, policy stability is absolutely crucial for that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We're out of time, so it just leaves me to thank all of our panelists for spending some time with us this afternoon. I hope those who've been listening in have found it helpful. We will, of course, send out the presentation to anybody that joined the webinar. Due to global time zones, that will probably be the Thursday for those people in the Americas, as it's the end of the day in Europe at this point. Likewise, the webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next couple of days as well for anybody that missed it or wants to review some of the points made by a very informed panel. Thank again to Haiqing Wang from GWO, Feng Zhao from GWEC for their amazing input into this report over the year. We'll put up the slide, the last one, so that you can see a download if you need to get hold of the report itself, which is of course available from both GWO and GWEC. We seem to have a bit of a technical problem on that, but it is available from all good retailers and certainly from GWO, and we'll send that out in the email to everybody in the next couple of days. Last but not least, we have Ramon Fiestas, of course, from GWEC, who thank him for his time, and Laura Phelan from American Clean Power, and Jeremy Faria, of course, who has given such useful information from the Brazilian perspective. That's it for today. Thank you again, and we hope that you've all enjoyed the session today and spend more time with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, and looking forward to the next one, Ian.